Coming to you from Rockingham, IPL Radio.
All right, and we are back. You are listening to The Late Show on IPL Radio, and we have with us Mark Regan. Mark, can you hear me? Oh, let me just quickly unmute here. Mark, can you hear me there?
Yes, I can.
There we go. All right, I'm doing the tech tonight myself. My tech guy has had to take the night off, so I'm doing sort of both sides of things tonight. So, but yeah, great to have you with me. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Kate, yourself?
Yeah, good. So we're here tonight to talk about, first of all, Space Brains podcast you do, I believe.
Yeah, I'm one half of the Space Brains podcast. It's a science fiction podcast, so we look into a science fiction film per episode, and those episodes roughly come out every 2 weeks.
Right.
And we, and then from there, we basically have done 101 episodes now over about 4.5 years. So
wow,
quite nicely. Yeah, sort of averaging out one a fortnight.
Yeah, right. And what sort of things do you discuss about the movie? Because obviously, being sci-fi, there's a lot of science involved in it. So just sort of break down the science and sort of which ones are more like scientifically accurate and stuff, or?
Yeah, so when we started Space Brains, we set out with the agenda of a bit of a terminology called hope punk or joy watching. So one thing we did set off is, because there's a lot of film review shows out there, TV, newspapers, podcasts, and just as a bit of a point of difference, we thought, why don't we just always talk about the positives in the film? So no matter if the film maybe has some issues or had some issues in the science of the science fiction, we just always looked at it a little bit more from a positive point of view. So that was always our sort of point of difference. So that's kind of the angle we come out for the whole episode, is we're just trying to look at the good of the science fiction and the great, not so much the bad. Yeah. I myself am a filmmaker, so then like my approach to each film is really looking at film, the narrative, the lighting, the editing, all the aspects that go into building a film. And then my co-host Surrey, who's a published science fiction author, and just he's a bit more into the science.
Yeah, so right. Yep.
In every episode, he does a bit of a deep dive into some science that the filmmakers were kind of looking at, and then he sort of might correlate that out into, current research on that science, or even looking into it a bit deeper, into, what is actually happening, or, if it's something like time travel, which obviously hasn't been invented, however, he might look into that, a research paper where they've tried to prove that we could potentially time travel, for example, or, another film that like Event Horizon, we did many moons back now, an episode, which is sort of like a black hole kind of, a parallel universe that they discover that ends up being full of demons and stuff like that. He yep. Sort of the science he looked into is like, okay, well, what are black holes, and what actually is in a black hole and the reality of it. So
he really breaks it down from the science side of things.
Yeah, correct.
I like that. That's sort of where I come from myself, is sort of I always find myself breaking down the science in movies and plot points and stuff like that. I was wondering, as a filmmaker, do you sort of, can you really lose yourself in a story, or do you find yourself sort of picking apart the making of the movie and thinking about the angles and stuff like that, and like the lighting more than the actual story, or can you really enjoy it for what it is?
Well, that's sort of the ultimate test, I reckon, Kit, is that at the end of the day, if I watch a film and I'm kind of actually immersed into the story, then I feel like the filmmakers have been successful for me, because, I can be a bit, it's easy for me to spot mistakes. It's easy for me to sort of see the plot maybe unfolding ahead of maybe another audience member. And I've probably been like that because I've always been into film, and I've made films since about the age of 12. So I kind of get it. And so, the test for me is when a film does engross me and I really enjoy it. I come out at the end and I haven't thought about some of those techniques of filmmaking, then I go, that's a good film. So
Yeah,
that's
of
sort of always
course.
ultimate test. And but then other times as well, it is also like you might notice how amazing the editing is. And I guess because I talk about this with some friends that are not in filmmaking or colleagues and stuff, and it's, I might go, wow, the editing in that film was amazing. And they're like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. So
They don't understand the
sometimes
technical side of it the way you do.
yeah, so sometimes you can kind of really pick on something that maybe other people don't. And again, when those sort of Oscars and awards come around, you can kind of go, oh yeah, that film really did deserve some awards for editing, which is again quite abstract for other people. Or, again, even like costume and lighting and props, you might go, wow, that was amazing how they did that in that and in that particular film. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy films. I'm always sort of interested in what filmmakers are doing, and again, that test when it does suck me in. And sometimes it might be the most simple film where, like, especially based on a genre like science fiction or horror, you go, yeah, I know all the tricks they're going to do. So when a film does something totally different, or even does exactly what that genre should do, and they just do it so well, and you go, yeah, you've nailed it. I
Now
love
the
it.
execution.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I went
And
on
obviously there's all the well-known sci-fi films, Star Wars and stuff like that. And but is there any sort of maybe underrated films that you would recommend people sort of pay a little bit more attention to, or give a view?
Yeah, well, actually, because of Space Brains, we've tried to really vary up the viewing. So, like you just said, looking at something like Star Wars, of course, we actually haven't done Star Wars, believe it or not, but
Right.
we have done some of the other sort of big classics like The Matrix, for example.
Yeah.
But something that we have deliberately set out is, and Sari, my co-host, and I, we kind of suggest the films. We sort of alternate. Sometimes one of us might pick a couple, but definitely across the 100 episodes, if you go look at the catalog of what we've looked at, it's something we've definitely done is looked at, like we've looked at Chinese sci-fi, we've looked at German sci-fi, we've looked at British sci-fi. We've tried to vary the culture of sci-fi and filmmaking. We've also gone back in time, it literally as in looking at older films. Just over the course, and we've just kind of kept, trying to make it as various as possible. So, we may do a big Hollywood film, but then we look at, a Japanese sci-fi film the following week. And I think as audiences, we're super blessed now because of stuff like the streaming services where, you can go onto them, and you actually, if you do a bit of a deep dive beyond the algorithm, you can find Japanese sci-fi in Australia on Australian streaming platform. And likewise, you can also find a lot of the Australian sort of science fiction, which I know many people might go, oh, Australians make sci-fi, and they do. So,
yeah. How do some of the foreign sort of sci-fi genres stack up against some of the better, well-known ones? Like you're mentioning the Japanese sci-fi, and I think as most recently the last Oscars was Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That was. I think that was probably more Hollywood, but sort of an Asian sort of cast. So how do they stack up? Is there anything you'd sort of recommend to people to sort of check out?
Well, the interesting thing is quite often they might be made a bit similar. And we notice that the Chinese sci-fi, definitely in terms of special effects and the cinematic world is very, very similar. Like they're trying to pitch their films to the same standard as Hollywood. But what definitely varies when you look at films from other cultures, like the themes may be different, or the way that the people interact in the film. So, we get very used to Hollywood, the good guy and the bad guy and the good girl and the bad girl and that sort of traditional archetype. And suddenly you look at a sci-fi out of China and they work as a team.
Right. Just a different approach to the plot.
Yeah. So I'm just going to forget the title of the film now, but there's a Chinese sci-fi we looked at where it's set in the future and The Wandering Earth, and it's available on Netflix. Yeah, that's what it's called. it's a big sort of blockbuster styled, very similar in a vein out of Hollywood. Could have come out of Hollywood. The special effects are amazing.
Oh, was this the one where they built giant engines on the side of the Earth to push it out of the orbit or further out of the sun's orbit or something? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I've heard of that one before.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't have, to me, any recognizable actors, but the acting's quite good. And as I said, it's that big sort of world scale effect of, you just mentioned, they're building these machines to sort of keep spinning the Earth out of the sun's orbit. Yeah. So great sci-fi concept, really interesting. But what, again, in that, the way that they accomplish that in that film is they all come together to actually achieve it. And so it's not like took the comparison of Independence Day, where Will Smith has to kind of, fly a alien spaceship into the mother spaceship to kind of, self-sacrifice himself to save us, which is that very traditional, one good guy has to save humanity at the end that we get out of Hollywood. So really, so to me, it's more, you do get a little bit more of a version of the culture that the film is based in. And if you take the Australian sci-fi, Australian films quite often are a little bit more down at the end. They're not necessarily happily ever after films. That's Australian films, overall. And so it's really interesting to then see that in sci-fi that, in the Australian sci-fi, they're delving into those themes, that science themes, but then they have that Australian culture to it. And again, it might not be a hero saving the day. It's that, everything's not really going to quite work out, and that's okay. That's, we sort of all plot on and we move on and we get on with it. And so again, that that cultural effect comes into it. Yeah. So, I mean, I suggest to anyone out there, like, that's right. We sort of recognize a lot of the big US films, and it's always good to just sort of, explore the algorithm on your whatever streaming platform you use. You can kind of go for a bit of a deeper dive and find something that's a little bit weirder and interesting, and it might just kind of surprise you.
And speaking some of the bigger blockbuster films that come out of the Hollywood, I suppose, is there any that you would say? I was just talking about sort of underrated films. Are there any that are overrated? Like you've just mentioned that you sort of done a review on The Matrix, and they've just pumped out The Matrix fourth one with Keanu, Return for that. Have you done a review on that?
No, The Matrix itself, that very first Matrix, I think is, it's a classic. It's one that you need to look at if you're interested in filmmaking, if you want to be a writer. The Wachowski, they're not brothers anymore. They're sisters, I think, now, but I don't want to get that terminology wrong. But they made a film with The Matrix that, if you look at the narrative, it just ticks all the right boxes. They invented a whole new style of camera work with that 360 bullet effect.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
Comedy films and action films, to death after The Matrix.
Yeah.
But that was like, very cutting edge at the time. They also took sort of anime style into the Hollywood mainstream, which hadn't been done before. So, The Matrix is something that no matter what, people should look at if they're very interested. It's a very, very good example of a great narrative, traditional style, sci-fi, blockbuster film. I mean, sit there with a bag of popcorn, you're going to have a great 2 hours. Yeah. From there, I don't know where The Matrix really goes. It probably doesn't go as well. And I've seen some of the sequels, but I haven't seen that latest one that's come out.
Is there any sort of sci-fi series you think they should have just maybe left it at 1 or 2 and stopped sort of producing so many sequels?
Well, I think Star Wars itself probably, and it may be controversial to say, and there's people out there that are just so passionate, but yeah, I mean, you watch those modern versions, the modern 3 that they did, I mean, they don't quite have the same flavor as the old ones, and they've got that modern day Hollywood Disney effect that, I don't know, it kind of just loses the charm that those original.
I think that's a pretty common opinion. I think that's been a pretty common opinion ever since people seen Jar Jar Binks. But they haven't been too keen on the new ones, and I don't know. It's almost like a nostalgic effect to the old ones, and less CGI and stuff like that, But
those old ones, I mean, it just was incredible what they did with the special effects of the day. I mean,
Yeah.
again, another one that if you go look at Stanley Kubrick, famous filmmaker, there's a lot about him on the internet, good and bad as a filmmaker, but he's one of those archetype filmmakers, and his sci-fi film, that 2001 Space Odyssey, I mean, well before any sort of computer special effects, everything was done with models. He did, like I mentioned with The Matrix, how they invented that 360 camera
New sort of
effect.
revolutionary styles.
Yeah, he again with 2001 created, he did that dimensional. So he used trick photography, the old-fashioned sort of style of,
Right.
like things would be little because they were literally being shot down the other end of the studio and then using models to make it look like it was big. And you watch that film, because we did do that as an episode a while back. You watch it and you almost are like, this could have been made 5 years ago, and it
Yeah.
was made back in the 60s. It's just stands the test of time. And those special effects that he's sort of used are just, even 10, 20 years later, the people are still not doing it as good as what he did in the 60s, and
Yeah, right. And to think what he had available at the time compared to what they have available now,
yeah.
I think there's something to do with stories and, people relying too much on special effects and just big explosions now instead of coming up with just like good stories and good concepts and stuff like that.
Yeah, we can kind of always. I remember when I studied film 20 years ago, they always blame Steven Spielberg and Jurassic Park for that because.
Yeah, right.
And I saw a documentary about this, I think, a little while ago about Jurassic Park, and it was, Spielberg, obviously big, huge filmmaker, late 80s, early 90s, still is, but that he was sort of peaking at that point in time in terms of blockbusters, and had Jurassic Park, loved this script. Was concerned about the dinosaur. How do we do the dinosaurs? And these computer programmer guys called him into a meeting, and they showed him, and you can see it on YouTube. It's a very crude. It's that scene in Jurassic Park where all the dinosaurs sort of run through they're running through the park, and all those kind of vegetarian ones run past Sam.
Yeah, I think I know the scene you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. There's sort of like, it's literally the graph diagram of the dinosaurs running. And apparently Spielberg and his long-term producer, Kathleen Turner, they just went, what the hell is this? This is magic. We're going to reinvent movie telling. And they gave them 12 months salary to sit down and just work on dinosaurs, and
Wow.
So that's sort of the beginning of that whole, special effects on the computer.
That's where the CGI sort of comes from.
Yeah, that's right. So, incredible stuff. But Jurassic Park, I mean, if you go back to that one, I mean, he did do that, but he also used puppetry. He did the Stan Winston puppets, so it was a mix of the two, so it wasn't all computers, and you can kind of see the difference in the film when it's the computers and the puppets,
Yeah. And what about films like Indiana Jones and stuff? Does that fall under sci-fi, or is that just more like sort of adventure, or?
So what we have always defined sci-fi, I mean, I wouldn't say Indiana Jones is. I would put that under more like action adventure. But we at Space Brains, we've defined it as it has to have some element of speculative science.
Yeah.
So because there can be films as well that they call them sci-fi, but it's more based on actual science right now. And so we kind of actually also even divert away from them. So we need to look at films that are dealing with some sort of science and then just pushing it over the edge. And sometimes that's really extreme. Like I mentioned at the start, it could be something like time travel. It could be something that's way out of our technology, or it could just be, talking about DNA and changing that a little bit and cloning.
I was going to say that, what about sort of Resident Evil is sort of about a T virus? That's sort of scientific. So is that something you would delve into?
I think so. Yeah, definitely Resident Evil falls under that category. And I mean, I think, it's like zombie films, right? Like zombie films can be horror, but they can also be...
There is a scientific element to them.
Yeah. If they include the scientific element, well, then it crosses over. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, like everything with film, you always tend to have multiple genres in films anyway, don't you? I mean, you have the drama element, you have romance, you have the sci-fi.
Of course, yeah, you get little sort of cross sort of categories and stuff like that. What films would you say are like the most scientifically accurate when it comes to things like space travel and stuff? You hear about movies like Gravity with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, or Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey. I've heard these to be some of the most sort of scientifically accurate. Is there anything that you would say takes the title of most accurate?
Well, look, you've just named two that when you asked that, I was kind of thinking, because Gravity, you know, they just literally, it's just a pushing of our current, you know, space, the NASA sort of space, what is capable, you know, and then it goes, it becomes a disaster. Great film to watch and hold your breath. Have you seen that film before?
I haven't actually seen Gravity or Interstellar yet.
So with Gravity, it depends if you kind of like to, hold your breath for 90 minutes. But it's a really, really very tight film, and that's one of those ones that what you said to me at the start, can I watch a film? That's a film that I watched and I held my breath and I got out and went, oh my God, that filmmaker's a tricky bastard. He's
right, actually got you just completely involved in the story for that one.
He sucked me in and I was in it till the end. Interstellar is another one, and a fun film fact for that is even the musical score is a mathematical equation.
Right.
So they took it to that. I mean, Christopher Nolan, he's one of these filmmakers that it's all sort of perfected out. But yeah, the science apparently, all that time into Interstellar, he's traveling at the speed of light, and so Earth is aging, whereas the astronauts don't age. And each time they do that, Earth ages, you know, into the future, whereas the astronauts only age by days. And apparently all that is, you're exactly right, like it's all mathematically correct.
They've worked out the calculus for the time dilation and stuff.
We saw a film that we did, was a British sci-fi called The Beyond. So not a very big film. And that one, they ventured, there's sort of like this weird anomaly that happens in space, and then they want to venture up to explore it, as humans do. And the only way they could go up into space and actually, you know, think, oh, we can go through this, so they had to do a brain transplant of astronauts to like robots to withstand going into this black hole. And it's really interesting because in that they do like the whole brain surgery of taking a human brain to a robot. And that, you know, like I know Surrey talked a lot about that, you know that idea of human transplants using robotic arms.
Yeah.
You know, obviously they'd still in the movie Beyond taken it to another level, but yeah, it's kind of like, you could imagine them doing that, you know, like it was very surgically correct the way they did it. And they explained that, you know, the astronauts had to kind of learn how to use the robot body, and that, you know, the film took its time to actually
incorporate some sort of real elements that you would expect with those sorts of procedures.
Correct. So, and, you know, as someone that's had a friend that's had a double lung transplant, like, you know, that there's a lot of that kind of, you know, rehab and process of it and what actually is required and the risks. And that film really went into that. And so that was an interesting one as well. Yeah. So there is, and we've looked at quite a few that, the science, and I know that's more Surrey's realm. Just it's quite amazing. You can kind of watch these sci-fi and then you realize, like I said, with Interstellar, they even made the beat of the music a mathematical equation, and you're like, wow, that's a real attention to detail, isn't it? Keeping it on.
Yeah, you've got to admire the sort of work they put in. And obviously you're well versed in sci-fi films, and you mentioned that you've been making movies since you're about 12 years old. Has it always been sci-fi? Has that always been your genre of choice?
No, not at all, actually.
Right.
So I've kind of delved into horror and drama. And my latest short film, which has just been on the festival circuit, and it's in the next month after the festival, it will come on. I'll just put it onto YouTube publicly. It's sort of had about a 14-month festival circuit run, been quite successful, running quite a few festivals globally, which is great. A few awards in there, which is fabulous. But that one's actually a comedy drama. So, and more sort of in the abstract comedy kind of.
Is that the one about the plumber?
Yes, that's Harold the Plumber.
Harold the Plumber, yeah, right. So that's been doing the circuits for a while now. Can the public view that anywhere at the moment, or?
Yeah, well, it's just staying tuned. As I said, it will be on YouTube in about a month.
Yeah.
So, and that will be, publicized on my channel, the Mark Regan filmmaker sort of stuff, which you can find on Facebook and YouTube. So you can jump on board and have a look like that. Yeah. So as a filmmaker, where I'm at is the films I make. You want to put them in. Well, my sort of plan is, you make the film. You might do a cast and crew sort of premiere party, and then from there it goes on to a festival circuit. Has a budget, and I'm working with independent budgets here, so not huge budgets, but then just try to enter into as many festivals that I think the film fits.
Yep.
So the film previous to Harold the Plumber was a very different film. It was a horror thriller, probably more in the thriller genre, called The Memory.
Right.
And that one is available online because it's sort of now about 3.5 years old.
Yeah.
So that one ran for 12 months. Again, I picked festivals that would match, a thriller film. And likewise with Harold the Plumber, it's a comedy drama. So what are some comedy festivals, or, festivals that are more family friendly than that film? I entered into those festivals. And with festivals, you can't have it on YouTube. They want to premiere it. They want to have the exclusive.
Yeah, right. They don't want it out to the public before they're sort of doing their viewings and stuff like that. It's understandable.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so that's sort of the general rule with festivals, and always the advice I give younger filmmakers and stuff is kind of think about, if you're making this film and you want to chuck it on YouTube, great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to actually enter it into festivals, or enter it, put it into some sort of submission category anywhere in the world, you probably need to keep it a bit private for a period of time, and then and use that time frame and then put it out there, because it works both ways. It's good to have things in festivals, but it is also good to have things open access, that you can share with people via something like Vimeo or YouTube.
Yeah, of course. And have you always been based in WA? What's the sort of WA film industry like?
Look, it's small, but it's very team orientated. So I've got a lot of
good network.
In the film industry. There's a pretty good, strong network. Over the years, I've been involved because I have young children now, so I sort of had phases where I've been very heavily involved and then out of it. With the festival, Space Rains Festival last year, we had Ben Young, who's probably one of the biggest West Australian filmmakers in terms of, he's just had his third feature film, which he shot in the States with Billy Bob Thornton, who's one of the actors in that film. They're called The Devil's Peak, and it's had a US release. I've just seen tonight's going to be at the Revelation Film Festival as a premiere, so that's sort of like a big thing that's happening. And his previous feature film was a really big sort of blockbuster one called Extinction, which is a sci-fi film. That's why we got into the festival last year.
Right, got you.
And that's a great little sci-fi, sort of more, action sci-fi film that's available on Netflix. And he's the director behind that. So he's a big one. Another really big West Australian sci-fi film that was a few years ago now is I Am Mother by Grant Spatore, and so he's another West Australian filmmaker. So there's other guys and ladies out there that are doing quite well in different areas of the film industry.
Right. And so would you say it's sort of growing and there's more opportunities coming in recent years?
I think so, but I mean, it's still that old adage of you got to get out there and you got to make it happen for yourself.
Yeah,
you can't
got to put in the work.
You do, and like any art form, I learn this myself all the time. Like you're only really as good as your last film, and you got to keep trying to push the envelope a little bit. And every time you make a film, you learn, and every time you kind of get out there, that might be the film that actually gets you in front of someone else's eyeballs, that then they are a bigger producer and they want to take you on board. So Ben Young, for example, had the opportunity to make him one of those Screen West. His first feature was like Screen West funded. He said, I didn't think anyone was going to watch this film. And it got picked for the Venice Film Festival. And from that, producers in the States saw it, and then they literally rang up his agent and were like, hey, we've got this sci-fi, $30 million film that we're going to make, and Ben come and direct it, So
it's that simple sometimes. Well, I say that's simple. There's obviously a lot involved in the movie that he made to start with, but it can be sort of, when I say that, simple as just getting seen by the right people. And, of course, you've got to be making content to be seen. So keep putting in the work.
That one idea that you have as a writer, filmmaker, whatever your sort of area, same for actors as well, right? Like that last film, that one thing that they do could be the thing that launches them, into the right people that go, hey, yeah, we want to know more about this filmmaker or this actor or writer or whatever it might be. So, and it is a bit of, I've done a lot of research and follow a lot of those other people online, and there's a bit of luck involved and there's a bit of who you know, but I am a big believer in, keep making really good quality stuff and keep putting your art out there, and eventually, hopefully, something will come from that.
Where's the best place to start for someone in Western Australia that wants to get into the film industry, whether it's sci-fi or drama or comedy or whatever it may be? Is it sort of university courses, or is there just sort of workshops you can go to for this sort of thing? Or
look, traditional studying at any level is really a personal choice. And any art form, and including filmmaking, no one is ever going, those opportunities we were just talking about, no one is going to turn to Ben Young and say, show me your university degree.
Right, got ya.
It's going to be as good as the idea that he's got. If he's pitching a pitch to a producer, Steven Spielberg, or a producer that loves it, they're never going to say, I want to have a look at your university credentials. Like, that's never going to happen.
Once you've got that back catalogue of some decent projects behind you, then...
Yeah, once you can prove you can make a film, or you can prove you can make a film. However, the but to that, of course, is if you go to university, TAFE, SAE is a big place which does a lot of hands-on stuff. TAFE does some really hands-on stuff. University itself, like if you want to choose one of those courses, what is great is, of course, you get a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the length of the course might be, and you get to play, don't you? You get to actually play, make films. You're there with other people that want to be filmmakers too.
Yeah, right.
And you guys get to just play without that, without worrying about the money. The universities have great equipment, TAFE have great equipment. You get to kind of do stuff, and your lecturers and your teachers are there to literally help you get better and better and better along that path. So there's a lot of benefit, especially if you're quite young, to doing that. However, you could grab that mobile phone, and these days, it's got great little video cameras in them. And
everybody's just posting videos and stuff these days, so you do hear about that happening. But I suppose with social media, it is easier for people to get their name out there, but I find it's also, there's a lot more people doing it, so you can sort of get lost in the sea of people sort of trying to get exposed. So it's got its pros and its cons to it.
Definitely, I sort of battle a bit, even though I've learned a lot about social media myself. It's hard to know what the right mix is as a filmmaker, because you don't want to also spend, you want to spend the time on the craft of making films. However, you need to build an audience, right? So the main audience now is online. So, cinemas are not what they used to be. The streaming services are massive now. More people pretty much do spend their money at home when you talk about film. And you can see all that content on TikTok or, Facebook, whatever, YouTube for free. Like, you don't have to really pay for it. It is a hard battle that, as any artist, why make a film if no one's going to see it, right? So you have to build an audience. Like, that's part of it, And even
I suppose, like you were saying, that's what can sometimes be the advantage of TAFE, is that you sort of get that time to get that experience to maybe make a few movies that nobody's going to see, but at least you get the experience of working with the equipment, networking with people and stuff like that, and get a couple of projects under your belt, even if they weren't like completely finished, nobody's seen them, whatever. At least you're going out into the big world of the film industry with a little bit of something under your belt. So.
Yeah. And that question you asked about starting out, I think, that's the benefit of studying. You can come out of that with 3 or 4 films. They don't even have to be very good, but at least you've had that experience. And I mean, but at the same time, you could do that yourself, as I said, with the mobile phone camera or, your own equipment. The equipment's cheaper and cheaper now. And, you can run around with your friends and make films. And some people I know have done that. They've just walked that path of literally filming stuff all the time and creating a bit of an audience online. And that's what gets them that first shot that at the bigger league, is that, they have a YouTube channel with thousands of subscribers and
certain following.
So producers go, sure, let's give you a gig because you've already got a following. You get this.
And if they do get into it and start making films, just talking about one of the main reasons why we're chatting tonight, the Space Brains Sci-Fi Film Fest. What do people need to do to sort of enter a film into that? Sort of short films, long films?
So look, unfortunately for this year, we've now, the entries are closed for films, but what people had the opportunity to submit is a short science fiction film as a category. We also had music videos, as long as it was science fiction themed.
Right.
We also had feature, but then we divided those categories down into, we had an international category, but then we really wanted to, when we did this festival first last year, and then now this is the second year, we have a Mandurah and regional WA category, and we have a West Australian category, and then we have an Australian category, and then we have an international category. So,
oh wow.
Experience again of all the festivals I've dabbled with across the world, it's like, well, I thought, let's try to give not only like West Australian filmmakers an opportunity to have their film on the big screen, but even Mandurah filmmakers and regional WA filmmakers a shot. And if they get picked and we put it on the big screen, they also have the opportunity of winning the trophy and the award. And they get to have their film, on a nice big cinema screen and, to a live audience. So, which I can say as a filmmaker is like terrifying and also very exciting to
it's sort of the goal for what you're going for, but I suppose that's when you would feel most vulnerable and you're finally putting your art on display. So how many sort of films can people expect to see at the Film Fest?
So probably around anywhere from 15 to 18 short films. So although we have a featured category, we don't, unfortunately, at this point in time, have the ability to, the length of time to play features. Last year, I think we played, I think it was 14 short films and 2 music video clips. And those short films on average, varied from, I think our shortest film was 2 minutes and then our longest short film was about 15 minutes. So the whole sort of session went for about a 2-hour period. Really, fun environment. People had a great time. There was an Audience Choice Award afterwards. We handed out the awards. And, many of the filmmakers that were selected actually came. We had 2 people come from Melbourne, which was exciting. They had submitted films and they were selected and they flew over and came into Mandurah, so that was great. And then we had other West Australians. A couple of the internationals obviously didn't make it. Maybe this year, who knows? But it was a great kind of communal experience. There was lots of laughter and scary moments and all that. It's I mean, whether you've gone to a festival yourself or not, it's kind of quite a unique experience because you're not just there walking in to watch one science fiction film. You're going in and there's this variety of films.
A lot of concepts and stuff, I imagine. And do you come across new, interesting concepts for sci-fi films?
Yeah, for sure.
There is still some original ideas out there?
Yeah. Now, the favorite last year was from France, and so the people chose this one. And I mean, we watched it. We were like, we have to include this one, and it was a time travel Nazi film. So there was a soldier coming back in time, and the Nazis were there in Paris, and I think they had a soldier in a chair, and they were trying to get information out of him. And so the time travel was the whole point of, in the future, the Nazis actually succeeded. And so they were going back to stop them succeeding in this moment in time, apparently was the moment that shifted the war. And so that was like, oh, that's really cool. So you're using history and time travel all in the one. And that was a crowd favorite that actually got voted the Audience Choice Awards. So you can have anything from that through to there was a really quirky little animation one from a guy out of Melbourne who, it was just about what's inside someone's brain, and it was full of flies. It was quite horrific, but I had to laugh at it. It was awesome. And then there was a couple of there was a Canadian one as well that was a very socio sci-fi, which is always really interesting. So more there was an alien had landed and it was affecting everyone's memory, and this relationship where, one of the partners had died and then the alien was appearing as the dead partner. And so it was all about, their actual relationship. So that was really cool. That was something very different. There was such a variety of films, which always blows me away.
Yeah, right. And I've seen there might be a couple of sci-fi writers or something doing panels or taking questions or something. How will they be involved?
Yeah, so the day split into, we've got workshops during sort of earlier in the day, and then we've got the film festival I was just talking about kind of later in the day. And anyone out there has the ability to either buy an all-day pass to the whole thing, or they can just choose either the workshops or the actual festival, the film festival component. Last year we had 5 30-minute workshops, and we did everything from podcasting to writing to science to filmmaking.
Right.
But the feedback we got afterwards was people loved that, but they wanted more hands-on workshops. So this year we're doing there's 1 2-hour really hands-on podcasting workshop, and then there's a 2-hour science fiction writing workshop. So Space Brains will be doing the podcast workshop, and a guy, he's a local writer, he's award-winning, he's written novels, he's edited a science fiction magazine here in Australia for many years called Stephen Deadman, and I think he does a bit of lecturing as well at UWA.
Right.
So he's going to be running like a 2-hour hands-on, so you're going to literally go in there and do some writing. Workshop about how to write an award-winning sci-fi story, etc. Before the films, we have we're flying him over from Gold Coast. He's called Luke Spark. He's a writer, director, producer. You can catch his blockbuster Australian sci-fi films on Netflix called The Occupation series, which is as good as Independence Day. Like, I'm not joking. They're these big blockbuster styled
right,
whole alien invasion kind of thing, and he's doing really well because he's independently financing them through American producers, and they just basically want more. He also just finished it's a bit more in the crime genre feature film with Sam Neill and Barry Pepper.
Oh, really?
Really big actors, and that's going to be back in cinemas soon. So, and he just online announced another film that he's about to go, and I know that he's been commissioned by Netflix for a series on an old sci-fi book. It's about a group of soldiers that are in Vietnam, and they time travel back to the dinosaur era, and so that's going to be like a big Netflix series, one of those.
Wow.
Episodes. So his production company's been commissioned by Netflix to do that. So he's a real up and comer. He's been working his butt off for many, many years. We had him on the podcast about 3 years ago, and he was a lovely guy, and he's sort of always supported Space Brains, and we've returned sort of supported him, and you can just see his career as a filmmaker really exploding, especially in this last 12 months. So it's going to be great. He's going to be in the room before the films, kind of doing about a 30-minute keynote, talking about being a filmmaker and the success and how to be a filmmaker in this industry.
Awesome. And where do people get tickets to attend the workshops and the film festival?
So the direct way is Humanitics. So you can just literally go on there and Space Brains, it will come up. And like I said, you've got the option of the workshops if you just want to attend those 2-hour workshops. And we've had people purchasing them. And then there is the actual film festival ticket, or there's the option to kind of buy the whole day. The workshops are going to be at Watso, Mandurah, so they are a bit limited in their seating. There's about 30 tickets available there, and they are selling quite fast. And then the actual film component will be in Reading Cinemas in Mandurah. So, head over to Humanitics, just search Space Brains, it'll come up really nice and easy. or you can head to spacebrains.com.au and just follow through the information there, the links, etc. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram.
And there's Space Brains podcast. Where's the best place for people to keep up to date with you sort of breaking down all the science movies?
Yeah, so it's all anywhere you can get a good podcast. So, if you're on Apple, you can get it there. If you're on Spotify, you can get it there. Podbean, all the places you find podcasts. And it is also just on our website if you're, I don't know, one of those old school download episodes to a computer and you want to just, don't want to be signed up to any of those streaming platforms or anything.
You like to accommodate for people of all different sort of abilities.
Well,
good to know.
Sci-fi. Yeah, sci-fi fans, they might be there with a tinfoil hat on and they don't want to put their name.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, who's taking my data?
That's right. So you can literally just go to our website and download the old MP4 files. So that's kind of comes from my co-host Surrey being a big IT guy, that he's like, oh no, we've got to keep it pure on the internet.
Yeah, right. I do like some of the science behind these movies and sort of breaking it down and finding out what is actually possible and sort of what's not. So I'm interested to check that out, a couple of those episodes. And just quickly, if people want to be extras, because by the sounds of it, there's a lot of movies being made here in WA. If people wanted to be extras and stuff like that and just get into the industry, where's the best place for them to sort of apply for something like that?
Well, it is the old-fashioned networking events. So Screen West, I mentioned before, the state government, that's the West Australian Screen Funding kind of initiative. They have a couple of official events per year. So, it's the old-fashioned rock up, put your face in front of the filmmakers present, because quite often they will be the bigger filmmakers at those events.
Yeah.
Then my second advice is definitely on Facebook. You've got a couple of key groups in Perth. So there's the Perth Film Network. So just if you search up Facebook for Perth Film Network,
you get the Facebook groups.
Facebook groups that's got about 5,000 people, but it's a very active group.
Yeah,
I actually am the admin of, there's a Mandarin Regional WA film networking group, and we get together a couple of times in Mandurah throughout the year. So if anyone's sort of local to Rockingham and surrounding suburbs, join that Facebook group.
I might have to check that out.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a bit of activity on there. And the reason why I say join those groups is it's a good way to just see who else is on there. But any opportunities on the independent level, as you said, starting out as an actor, you kind of have to chuck your name up and just say, yeah, I'm willing to do this and willing to do that. Any opportunities, like when I make a film, I tend to advertise across those groups, across my pages and stuff like that. So, that's kind of always step one. Then the other thing that actors quite often start with is it's a website called Star Now. It's like, I'm pretty sure it's free, so it doesn't cost an actor to get on there or anything. And you can kind of create a profile, so you can upload a couple of photos. If you start making, you start being in films, you can kind of link them onto your profile page. And I do know, the RAC commercials in WA, they're really big commercials that you'll get paid good money to be an actor in.
Yeah, right.
Just for example, they use Star Now, for example, to cast people. So there's opportunities just to, if you're starting out, to put your name out there. And then if you're really keen from there, I would create a website as well, for yourself, and go to that next step. And again, there's free website builders. So you can always start with the freebies, and then if you start making money and
see how seriously you want to take it and build from there.
Correct. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, Mark, thanks heaps for being on the show tonight. I hope the Film Fest goes very well. You've been very informative for people that want to get into the industry. And also, I look forward to sort of checking out your podcast, the Space Brains podcast. Just before you go, do you have any song requests that you would like?
Oh. Well, why don't we do something like Lord Supercut?
Lord Supercut. I'll just see what we've got in the system. We've got some Lord. We don't have any Supercut apparently.
I'm always a bit of a fan of anything local, like Australian, and keeping it sort of as local as possible. Do you have any gyroscope in there?
Gyroscope. How do we spell gyroscope?
G-Y-I-R. Sorry, not I.
Gyroscope. Yeah, we've got some gyroscope. We've got snakeskin or Doctor.
Yeah, why don't you go Doctor? It's nice and rocky. Get people pumped up at this time of night.
Beautiful. Excellent, Mark. Thanks again for being on. But yeah, make sure everybody that's listening gets down and checks out the Space Brains Sci-Fi Film Fest on the 17th of June. And just Google it and check it out on the socials to get your tickets. But yeah, again, thanks to Mark for being on. And we will go to Doctor by Gyroscope.